age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, crystals and fondle slab of choice. I don't know that doesn't really matter.
There it is.
Professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real these days, because seriously, they don't want you to just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out. You know, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man.
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of.
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
Damn sure no, I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years.
That's that.
19-year-old girl to eventually get the gumption to put those things down.
Oh my, all that noise in my headphones means it is Saturday night. Well, it could be Tuesday night, it could be Thursday night, but definitely today it is Saturday night, at least here in America. Tonight I have a guest who is actually on the other side of the planet, and it's Sunday for him. But we finally got our little time confusion fixed earlier today, and thank the gods for that one, because I was rather confused, and we both made the same confusing mistake about what time of day it was. So that was pretty interesting. But though, if I'm going to make mistakes like that, I'm glad that there's another intelligent person who makes the same mistake, so I don't feel too terrible about it. Anyway, tonight's guest is an author and a researcher and just a really interesting guy overall, who seems to be one of the most well thought out people that I could possibly bring you on the subject, who has written about it. And his name is Greg Parker from Australia. You want to say hello to the audience, Greg?
G'day, Chuck. It's good to be on your show.
And I'm definitely glad to have you tonight. You know, it has made the rounds a little bit, and I'm hoping that tonight's appearance will help it make the rounds a little more. You've authored. There we go. See, I tell you guys every time I got to trip over my own tongue 3 times during every show. That's one. Okay. Now, you have authored 1 volume so far of what is going to be a 3-volume set of books, I believe. And,
that's correct. Yeah.
And the subject is, of course, our old friend, our favorite Patsy, Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald, or at least that's what the title suggests. So, would you like to tell us about that first book and where you've started off your presentation?
Sure. Well, the first volume is split into three parts. The first part deals with what I consider an assassination that's long been ignored for no good reason, of a guy called George Gaitan in Colombia in 1948. In looking at that, I also go back a bit in time to look at the history of U.S. involvement in Colombia. That's looking at United Fruit, the annexing of Panama, all that sort of stuff. I got so involved in it, I could have written the whole book about that, to be frank with you.
Right. Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I did eventually move on to the main subject. But, and the second part deals with, the Korean War, which again, I think is very important to the Oswald story. That might be hard to see the connection there, but, what it boils down to there is that there was the Chinese, worked out a formula for being able, or a formula for identifying potential defectors and stuff like that. And Oswald ended up with that very, very same profile. And I think that's where it came from.
So the profile that the Chinese were developing at the time, and also after covering some of the misadventures that American companies, so-called American companies, had in Central and South America, which, of course, United Fruit is one of those things that comes up when we're discussing Cuba and that entire debacle that occurred after the fall of Batista and the well, I don't know how to put it, but the rise of the Castro regime and the interactions that followed, and of course what follows from there is the Cuban Missile Crisis. So looking at those things, and also the Korean War and the intelligence assets that were developed there as they related to what we now call the Communist Chinese, in that Cold War sort of atmosphere, this is where your book begins.
Yeah, well, yeah. The first volume deals with those issues, and then moves on to begin basically a biography of Oswald. Part of the reason for concentrating on Oswald is that I really want to humanize the guy. He wasn't a nutcase. He wasn't a loner. He wasn't anything that most books paint him as being. And I think I hopefully bring that out in my writing of him.
Right, and I think it's incredibly important that we try to humanize a guy who ended up being also assassinated in public. And the fact is that the wild range of stories that has emerged about the guy, everything from the official government position to various fairy tales, which we won't name right here, but there have been various fairy tales that have been sort of promulgated in various literary areas that have sort of given this guy everything from the loose cannon sort of malcontent maniac to the to almost the 007 kind of James Bond character. And it is important that we take a realistic look at this individual who is inexorably linked with the assassination of our 35th president in this country, which did shape quite a few world events that were to follow.
Mm. Yeah,
So in your attempts to humanize Oswald, you start with his childhood?
Yeah, right back to his early childhood. In that, he and his brothers were in an orphanage in New Orleans when they were very young, and the person who would become Marguerite's third husband, Edwin Ekdahl, it's what I've shown in the book for the first time is that he had involvement in the Lutheran Church orphanages in New York prior to that, and I believe that's where they hooked up, or where they met, or he had some involvement in getting them into that orphanage.
Well, it's an interesting story because Robert Oswald, Lee Oswald, and even John Pick, right, were all actually kind of left at these orphanages by their mother, I think, and it was until this character Ekdahl comes in to her life, and then she kind of reclaims her boys, right?
No, she actually leaves the older two in care and just takes lead. And after the marriage and their move to Texas, something weird shows up in the records. They had periods where they had separated, and during those separations, Lee is enrolled in two different schools, not at the same time, I might add, but he goes to two different schools at different times. The records of those schools show only one parent, not Marguerite, Edwin Ekdahl. So I believe he was actually, during those separations, was staying with Ekdahl, not Marguerite.
Well, that's interesting, and I wasn't even aware that she hadn't gone and gotten back and picked up Robert or John, because quite honestly, I've spent so much time trying to follow what happened with Lee that I never noticed.
She used the excuse that she wanted them to finish school. She didn't want to interrupt their school year. Now, that sounds fine on the surface, but that never ever stopped her interrupting Lee's school year. She uprooted him at the drop of a hat. So I believe that those older boys were left in there on purpose because there was something happening just between Marguerite Lee, and Ekdal. They had to be separated from the older boys.
Mm. And both of the older boys at some point or other sort of claimed that they didn't really understand anything that had happened to their brother. He seemed to have changed on them. I mean, some people have interpreted it as he was a completely different person. Some people have said that he just went through some changes that were hard to understand. I know that that's a fact, that both of them at one time or another sort of had reservations about the either the persona or the person of their younger brother, right?
Yeah, that's true, but you've got to look at the history as well. John Pickett had not seen his brother very much at all, except for the period of time where Lee was taken to New York City. And after that, he didn't see him for another 10 years. So I'm not surprised he couldn't recognize one photo of him from childhood. He very rarely saw him. That's the bottom line. But as far as looking different when he came back from the USSR, that's explicable in that, basically he had roundworms, which affected, his weight, hair loss, all that sort of thing. Now that's not recognized by anyone, but it's in the Russian hospital records.
He also had the mastoid surgery, as well, right?
As a child, yeah, as a 5-year-old. Well, yeah, as a 5 or 6 year old, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that could have altered his appearance a bit as well. In the case of Pick, because Pick had not seen him in a long time, he didn't have a very good, many mental references to be able to compare him to. But, all these sort of things could have fed into that, and that makes it a whole lot more plausible and a lot less spooky. That's for sure. So moving through his childhood, you discovered that there was this sort of odd connection where Ekdal was really the responsible parent, even though really Marguerite, for all intents and purposes, should have been. Well,
I'll give you a bit more of what I found about Ekdal. I went pretty deep. I think I've researched him more deeply than anyone else has. And what I found was that when he first came to New Orleans, he was staying at the Roosevelt Hotel. Just so happens that George Hunter White was also staying at that same hotel at the same time, doing a tour of southern bases, testing his drugs for as a truth serum type thing.
I'm sorry, who was it that was also doing that tour?
George Hunter White, who worked for the DEA and then was seconded to the CIA for various projects under Artichoke and all that sort of stuff.
So again, we have these odd sort of links into stuff like MK Ultra and Artichoke and the psych warfare division of the CIA.
He was staying at with a team of chemists or whatever they were from Fort Detrick at the Roosevelt Hotel while he toured southern bases. Now he'd been given a list of names by the FBI of suspected comsimps on those bases, and he was going in and testing cannabis on them to see if they'd open up with that. And it just so happens that Marguerite, while all this was going on, she was actually working at the Algiers Naval Base in New Orleans, 5 minutes from this hotel where they were staying.
And this is at the time that Lee is going to school in New Orleans as well?
Yeah, Lee was either being looked after by Marguerite's sister or by someone else entirely. That's unclear from the records. I couldn't nail that down exactly who was looking after him at that time.
Well, yeah, it does become really convoluted, and I mean, it is not even a simple sort of couple of mistakes that occurs throughout Oswald's life. The records are almost confounding. I mean, even if you begin to dig into some other people's work on the subject, you find that there are many records in complete conflict where it's not even possible that one individual could have even participated in these two diametrically opposed things. Sort of like where you find him going to school in two different states at the same time.
Yeah, well, I don't really buy into that. I don't think that's true. So I think that's a misreading of the records.
Ah, okay. Well, that's great because I've always wanted someone to clarify some of that stuff for me. So, as you're continuing though, she's staying near the base in New Orleans, and someone is,
yep, and working there.
And working there. And meanwhile, he's not far away. And, it's just a strange kind of proximity to that kind of stuff, huh?
Well, the weirdness doesn't stop there. Ochelli was wooing her while he was staying at this hotel. She was playing hard to get. Then his sister came down from Boston to talk Marguerite into the marriage, which sounds very romantic, but I mean, Ochelli at that stage was a well-to-do man. He could have got anyone. He didn't have to chase Marguerite, you know. A recent widow with 3 kids. The weirdness continues. After the assassination, it was discovered by the FBI that he'd never actually divorced his first wife. So the marriage was actually a bigamous one.
Huh. That's really odd. I mean, Marguerite has always been an interesting character, to me anyway, because she seemed to make some claims that some of us, have later on sort of attached to about Lee having been an intelligence asset and things like that. But she also sort of behaved rather strangely after the assassination as well. Not only did they discover the whole thing with the marriage not being valid, but I mean there was a lot of strange behavior from Marguerite afterwards too, right?
There was indeed, yeah. I actually think the first time she mentioned Lee being an agent, though, actually happened in 1962. She told a doctor or a dentist or something. So it's not something she just came up with after the assassination. It was before.
Oh no, and there was even the sort of request that she was making while he was in Russia, regarding whether something had happened to her son because he was supposed to go over there for some other purpose, and this is where Oswald's name comes up in records with the FBI as well, where they were supposed to try and look into his whereabouts after he left too, right?
Yeah, that all started because letters were being returned from him to Marguerite, and she got concerned about that and started making inquiries, and that was a series of basically trying these whispers up through the ranks up to Hoover. By the time it got to Hoover, there was this big concern about someone using his birth certificate, but there was never any proof of that or never any evidence for that. It was a story that grew and grew until it got to Hoover.
Right, and that started partially because of the reports that somebody had tried to purchase something with using his name in New Orleans at the time he was in Russia, I think, right?
Not that I'm aware of, Chuck. No, I'm not aware of that one. That could be true.
Well, it was a New Orleans thing where, there was some sort of purchase that somebody was trying to make under Oswald's name, a truck or something like this. And it has never been solid.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah. I'm not sure about that one either. As far as I'm aware, the only name given was the surname Oswald, and Lee was far from the only Oswald in New Orleans. So.
Oh yeah,
I'm not convinced that was any attempt to use Lee's name or to I don't know, to act as a double for him or anything like that.
Oh yeah, I don't buy into that either, to be honest with you. I don't think he was doubled. Most of these cases, like you're saying, I do believe are exactly what you're saying, which is that it's a misreading of records and sort of sloppy bookkeeping on the behalf of certain agencies, including, school districts and things where, they may have continued transcripts or been sort of, lazy about putting check marks in the right place. And this is how things happened, when someone moved rapidly. I mean, this is before the age of computers, and paperwork wasn't necessarily something that was transferred without some effort. So I think there was a lot of lags and sort of mistakes that were made throughout his records in his younger years, for sure. But even so, when you do go beyond the records and you start to talk to people and you begin to examine some of the more solidly, vigorously kept records, you do find contradictions, though, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. There are contradictions all over the place in the records, but that's having worked in a large bureaucracy myself. It's that's not exactly uncommon to find that. So there could be innocent explanations for some of them, or all of them. I don't know. All I know is I think a lot of the issues about doubling are misreadings and exaggerations and whatever.
Well, as we've discovered, because I know both you and I are really familiar with a lot of different researchers, we've discovered over the years that a lot of people do sort of selectively read things in order to fit their own theses to begin with, instead of actually pursuing the evidence as it appears you are doing, which is, let's find the conclusion from what is actually there, as opposed to trying to draw a narrative and then see if you can fit the evidence into it. So I'm very glad to hear that, and really am anxious to hear what you discovered from there. I mean, we were at New Orleans and we have this incident with her being in proximity there, and Ekdahl having been involved, and he's got a lot of odd things about him, and you did a lot of work on him, and I got to be honest with you, I don't know very much about him at all.
Okay, well, he ended up back in New York after they divorced, and I actually had to find out of a lawyer in the US how that stood with why was there a need for a divorce if they were not legally married to start with, and apparently that is the case. They still had to get divorced because the marriage was generally accepted in the community. So, just to explain that, in case anyone's wondering, that they did need a divorce even though it was a bigamous marriage. Where was I?
Go ahead.
After that, Ekdahl went back to New York where he'd been living before, and when Marguerite came to New York with Lee, when they moved out of the Pick residence, they again, they were only about 4 or 5 miles away from where Ekdahl was working. And I believe Ekdahl knew a lot of influential people in New York, including the superintendent of New York schools. I think that's how Oswald got into a school out of area through that contact. That's puzzled a lot of people how he could possibly go to a school that wasn't in his area. Well, that's how I believe it was done, through Ekdahl's connection to the superintendent of schools.
Well, right, because there was an issue as to whether he had attended the school in New York. If he had, was he living at a residence that it would have made sense for him to have attended that school? And I know that issue's come up before. But as you said, these kind of things can easily be waived if you have individuals that are friendly within the bureaucracies that control these things. So obviously they could allow you to, go to a school in the next town if you're a kid. If you have, people that are friendly in that next town to make those arrangements for you and accept that even though you're not a local resident, you can get in there. So that's a good, reasonable explanation for that. And to be honest with you, I had never heard that before.
Yeah, well, the connections had never been made before. But they were both connected to the church. They were, to the Lutheran Church, in New York. Both did charity work for it. Both had German, Netherlands bloodlines. Both had similar interests. Both worked very close to each other. They were both the same age. A heap of things made me believe that they were connected together in some way. He's important because he was running a investigation into communist influence in schools at the time, and this is a period where Oswald's refusing to salute the flag and stuff like that.
Yeah, and to put that in proper context, at the time in America, there was quite a bit of official sort of, I don't know how to put it. I mean, paranoia is the only word I can use for it. But there was a lot of behavior in official circles, law enforcement, and even in the bureaucratic circles to report on and investigate anything that appeared to be un-American in any way, shape, or form, because this is the time of the serious Red Scare in this country. So that makes perfect sense. And this is, a child not saluting the flag and acting in a rebellious way against what are supposed to be good, wholesome American ideals would definitely take those who are, watching these things definitely aback and make them very suspicious. So, yeah, I could see how that could start up a whole lot of different things, right?
Well, that's the whole thing. It didn't make anyone suspicious. There's no evidence in the records that he was ever queried about why he didn't salute the flag. There were three separate inquiries into communists in New York schools happening at the time, including one being run by the superintendent. People were being encouraged to inform on each other. There was the union, the teachers' union was being targeted. There was this, like you say, the whole system was being run on paranoia, and that was encouraged. Now, in the middle of all that, why isn't this kid being questioned? I mean, you would expect that sort of behaviour comes from the home. So why are no questions being asked about what sort of home life he's got? It didn't happen, and that follows the same pattern in the USSR later on when he threatens to give radar secrets to the Russians. No one cares. In New York, no one cared about his lack of regard for the flag. In Russia, no one cared about potentially giving away radar secrets. Both of those things just don't strike me as very realistic in that time period.
Well, it seems as though almost an unseen hand would have to be involved in sort of deflecting an investigation or at least inquiries into his behavior all throughout. Because obviously when he was threatening to give secrets, to the Russians and attempting to defect and all that, it just really sort of went off without a hitch. And you're saying that even at a very early age, they really weren't even paying attention. It was sort of like, no, that's okay. We know what that is already, or something, right?
Well, the thing with it is, I think he was acting as a provocateur, an agent provocateur.
Provocateur, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
No problem.
My own research tells me that even today, kids are used in as informants and provocateurs in various situations. Some states have now set a minimum age of 13 for such work. And that's when Oswald's problem started. It didn't start straight away. It didn't start until he turned 13. So
what started at the age of 13
his truancy.
Well, right, and this is where we're usually introduced to those pictures of him in front of the fence at at the zoo, right?
And during the same time, John Pick is working for the intelligence unit of the Coast Guard, the PSU, Port Security Unit. Now, they were charged with ridding the ports of communist influence.
So, yeah. Well, so his first stepfather is involved in working for the Coast Guard. And actually directly involved in, again, these red sort of concerns, at exactly the same time that his, second stepfather of sorts is involved in something anyway, it seems, because he has all this influence. I mean, he seems to be an influential guy, and he is going right after, Marguerite. Like you said, that's kind of strange to begin with, because she is a divorcee, and she has the three kids as, I mean, let's just put it bluntly, as baggage, sort of. And it seems rather odd, unless that was exactly what the purpose of his actions was, right?
Exactly. I mean, he was a man of means, and he could have potentially got, someone without all that baggage, frankly. And yet he's pursuing her with a vengeance. And is quite happy to take on Lee, but not the other two.
Which is also odd because, again, like we pointed out, I mean, they were given over to these orphanages to sort of raise them in a way, but Lee was special in some way to the situation because Marguerite would retrieve him, even though it was said that it was sort of like a financial concern, and she didn't want to be a single mom at the time trying to raise all three of them. And like you said, it seems to be pretty flimsy that she's so concerned about disrupting their flow of schooling, but has no regard for disrupting Lee's schooling as well. So that's awfully fascinating. So John Pick is doing that at the time, and Lee is behaving in this way that seems to be getting ignored by all those who could have eyes on him. So what else is going on at that time?
Well, Lee's truancy and behaviour problems are bookended. At one end by his 13th birthday, at the other end when John Pick leaves the Port Security Unit. That's, as soon as John Pick leaves that unit, Lee's back at school behaving himself.
I mean, just right immediately when he stops doing that kind of work, all of a sudden Lee can actually stop being a truant and go to school, and just overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. So, then a few years later, I mean, I don't know if there's some stuff in between you want to cover, but I mean, do you get into the whole attempt to get into the Marine Corps and all that?
That'll come in the next volume. What else I looked at in this first volume as far as Oswald goes is Youth House. I felt it was another area that had been under-researched. Now what I found that it was started by a fund called the Lavenberg Fund, named after a guy called Fred Lavenberg. When I looked into the Lavenberg Fund, I found that there was a guy called Strauss who was president of the fund. He came from a large, very wealthy, very influential family, and his father was related by marriage to Fred Lavenberg. So this family set up Youth House and funded it. They also set up and funded the migrant accommodation, which housed the Rosenbergs in the 1940s. Just same people involved. Now, the Strauss family is interesting in another way. They owned a few large department stores. The guy I mentioned before, George White, his wife worked at one of those department stores. Another member of the family had a holiday house at the same place where the Paynes holidayed on Ashton Island. And another of the family was in the publishing industry, and one of his star authors happened to be E. Howard Hunt.
E. Howard Hunt. You mean E. Howard Hunt, the Watergate burglar, and a guy who on his nearly on his deathbed, but not quite on his deathbed, a few years before his death, supposedly gave this sort of nebulous confession about being involved in the assassination. That E. Howard Hunt?
That's the one. So
and
this family...
He's the guy... He was the guy who was writing these, like sort of spy novels and stuff like that. A lot of people don't know that, by the way, that E. Howard Hunt had been, quite an, author writing novels, mostly about, spycraft kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, this family, a member of this family was his publisher. And also, was interviewed for his security clearance for the CIA. So this one family, runs youth house, knew the Rosenbergs through housing them in their, estates, was involved in George Hunter White, who worked for the DEA and also the CIA in projects such as Artichoke, etc. And also E. Howard Hunt. So there's something new in the book that you won't find in any other book on this case.
Yeah, I've absolutely never heard of that. But it is, what's important to mention about this, and I know that you're sort of being modest and probably minimizing what it is you developed there. But the thing is that every time that you see these intelligence assets tied to people, and it's most interesting to see that the Strauss family was interviewed as part of Hunt's introduction into getting his clearance and all that, because that means that they were people that knew him many years, had intimate knowledge of the man, and could make definitive statements to explain to the individuals who were making the decision about his classification to be like very reliable. And usually they wanted people that weren't family members, but people that had known you at least like a decade or so at a minimum to be able to sort of vouch for you, to get your clearances or even to get your jobs with these intelligence agencies. And, when you see all this intermingling of these intelligence agencies, even at that time, there is no way that this stuff is just coincidence. I mean, a normal citizen who has no ties to the intelligence agencies might have had some encounters with some people at some time. But when you see over and over again this stuff occurring, it becomes extremely suspicious, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the one that was, had the holiday home on Nation Island, Ruth Paine had swung by there on her way to New Orleans to pick up Marina in September 63. And he was on the island at that time. He was an interesting guy too. He ended up on Nixon's shit list.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people did, but the fact that, and Ruth Paine, here's another character that we know had all these sort of dealings and run-ins, and, in my opinion, was at the very least used as an asset, by the agencies,
Well, I'm looking forward to Ruth, trying to explain some of the stuff I've got on her, so, good luck to her.
Have you ever spoken to Ruth, or?
No, she won't speak to anyone who's on our side of the picket fence.
Yeah, I know, but I just thought maybe you got lucky there because, she really has done that, really since the 1970s, as far as I know, because, there were individuals that even ran into her trying to research things, believe it or not, at the National Archives prior to, when she thought she was going to be called before the House Select Committee. So.
She's got to be put under oath and ask the right questions. And I think I've developed those questions that she needs to answer.
Well, I definitely look forward to seeing how that develops. But as we go forward, okay, so Oswald is 13. He stops misbehaving at the moment that Pick, stops working for the Coast Guard under that, again, something that's at least tinged with intelligence, work, in the very least. And, he stops misbehaving, stops being a provocateur. And then, where else do we go besides that? I mean,
the first volume ends with Ruth and, with Marguerite and Lee leaving New York. It's a little known fact that at the time they were in the last apartment they lived in, Lee looks like he's got himself a little girlfriend there that he walked to school with. So that's how I end the book with wondering what those walks together to school with this girl was like for him.
Well, that's interesting because, over the years, there have been, various stories about, Lee and his girlfriends and things, and we're not even going to discuss what supposedly, may or may not have occurred after he's married, but even as he's growing up, I don't know if you've ever seen the footage, but almost immediately they gathered up these young ladies who had gone to school with him in New Orleans to sort of describe him and give an idea of what type of interactions he was having as a kid. That was within days of the assassination. That stuff was being filmed. And I always found it fascinating that there really wasn't a whole lot of discussion about his interactions, say with girls very often, up until he goes into the military or defects, and we are very familiar with those kind of stories that rise there. But but I always found that stuff interesting because I thought that would be a very revealing sort of aspect of his character to explore that,
It seems to me that there was a bit of puppy love in this relationship. Just from reading between the lines of her FBI interview after the assassination. But, look, that's where that first volume ends. If you like, I can skip back and we can talk a bit about, the assassination I look at in Colombia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because this is really where your book began, is with the assassination in Colombia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure. Let's discuss that because this is all brand new to me, what you're going to go
over. It was a liberal leader called George Gaitan. He's known in Colombia these days as the Colombian JFK. That's probably not a very good description. He was, to me, very much like RFK. He was a young, charismatic liberal leader on the campaign trail when he was killed. And even his killer was almost a carbon copy of Sirhan Sirhan. So there are far more reference points for RFK than JFK.
Well, how is his killer very much like Sirhan Sirhan that we're very familiar with? How so?
He was a drifter, going from job to job, didn't have many girlfriends, did have one relationship that lasted a little while. But the big thing is that he got involved with the occult, through a German, palm reader, who I believe was actually an intelligence asset as well. But anyway, that's a separate issue. Through him, he joined, the Rosicrucians in California and got into self-hypnosis, all that sort of stuff. It's exactly the same as Sirhan.
So we have the occult sort of ties along with the hypnosis angle, which definitely plays a role in the RFK assassination, in my opinion, again. But the thing is, all those sort of familiarities, the sort of disconnected young guy who's got the difficulties with the relationships and turns to sort of spirituality and interesting plays with psychology in a way, right?
Yeah.
That's very fascinating. So this is the guy that does kill him, or do you think maybe he was?
Yeah, I believe he was a patsy. I believe he probably fired a shot the same as Sirhan did, but I don't think he could have hit the side of a barn door with a cannon. So I think the shot that he fired is immaterial. I went through all the witness reports, and there was a guy seen with him before the assassination who had his arm wrapped, had a coat wrapped around his hand. I believe he was the assassin, that the coat was hiding a weapon.
So it seems as though we have another guy who, even from the witness reports, because see, the problem with the Sirhan Sirhan thing, just on the surface, and I don't want to, climb into that one too far, but just on the surface, to give a sort of cursory explanation, is that even if he had pulled a gun in front of RFK and started firing, throughout most of the time that this 8-shot revolver was being discharged, his hand was actually in someone else's control, and the impossibility of really hitting Bobby Kennedy with those shots from that weapon in those circumstances is it's almost baffling to the mind to imagine that someone would even think that that could be done that way. But yet he did have a gun in his hand. He was there, and it seems as though, because RFK again was struck from a different angle than what Sirhan should have been able to strike him at. This is, like I said, a very, very sort of ABC explanation of this. But because of all that, and you think that that's exactly the same kind of thing that went on here, or is it just that it looks like somebody else was a diversion? Because Sirhan to me seems to be more of a diversion than an assassin. And is this guy a diversion, or is he,
He's just there to be the fall guy.
Wow.
Yeah. I believe he did fire a shot. There were 3 shots in succession which all hit their target. One that wildly missed. I think that was his. But the guy that eyewitnesses said was with him immediately sort of set the mob after him, because this was done at lunchtime in a town square. So it was highly visible. This guy set the mob onto him, and he was basically beaten to death.
Wow. Well, I was actually surprised that Sirhan had not been beaten to death in the Ambassador.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of amazing that he wasn't, to be honest with you, because they were on him right away, and because he was actually firing a shot, all eyes kind of went to the guy, it seemed. Well, except for a few people, but that's another story. But yeah, I mean, it almost seems like that's almost what was meant to happen to Sirhan.
You know, years later in Cuba, a guy called John Espirito was arrested and charged with trying to cause an insurrection in Cuba. He was actually a CIA agent, and after his arrest, he confessed to his part in the plot against Gaetan in Colombia all those years before. What he said was basically that he'd been sent to Colombia to act as a student, to spy on students, basically, to see where their rebel rousing was coming from. And he spoke 3 or 4 different languages, including Italian, and he was acting as an Italian student at the time. When Gaetan was identified as the cause of the union the student unrest, he was targeted for not assassination initially, but for to be paid off and sent into exile. This was common in Colombia. I've come across a few instances of leading liberals being sent to Europe to live the high life to get rid of them.
Right. In South American politics at the time, a lot of people that were deemed agitators in one way or another in the public forum were either some of them were bought off, that's true. Some of them were just wholly discredited or undermined in one way or another. And quite often it seems as though we had CIA assets involved in all these things, and many assassinations are really undercovered by anyone. They're not really followed up on by anyone's writing. Yeah. So I'm impressed that you went to the trouble to go over this one.
Gaetan rejected the offer to go to Europe to live, and that's when he was set for assassination. His daughter actually, in the 80s or 90s, confirmed in her own memory that through her own memory that he came home one day saying that he'd been offered a professorship in some Italian university or French university or whatever, a palatial place to live, etc., and he rejected that. And she, like I say, she said that she actually recalled all that happening. So I believe the story, his confession is borne out by those sort of memories, as well as the evidence itself of a second shooter.
Plus, it speaks again to the legitimate, established modus operandi of sorts of the intelligence agencies in that part of the world at the time. They often would sort of offer not only money, but like you said, a cushy job, a new home, everything. Listen, we'll make your life perfectly easy if you just go away. And that was the offer that was given to anybody that was not playing along with the program down there, it seems.
In looking into all these liberals that were sent to exile in Europe, I came across one called Gabriel Turbay, who went to Europe in late 47, just after the CIA came into being, basically. Now, he died in his late 40s in Europe, just as he was starting to talk about coming back to Colombia. He mysteriously dies. And funnily enough, he'd been treated by an American doctor called Dr. Leslie Gay for asthma. So I decided to look into Dr. Leslie Gay and found out that his son was CIA, that he had worked in 2 CIA facilities himself, experimenting with drugs, and that he was an expert in Dramamine, which had been used in things like Project Chatter for the Navy, as a interrogation drug or truth serum or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say I thought I had heard of that doctor's name when investigating interrogation techniques and drugs, because there was a lot of doctors actually. I mean, there was whole sections of the agency and the military that were devoted to doing that kind of research. And they did utilize obviously tons of doctors to administer and study the effective uses of various drugs. I mean, everybody's heard of the LSD experiments and stuff like that, and we've all heard of sodium pentothal, obviously. But they did explore all sorts of different chemical ways to extract information or to uncover double agents and things like that. And I was going to say that guy's name sounds very familiar from one of those documents that I think I came across before.
Dramamine was used for seasickness as well as allergies and stuff like that, which is a trigger for asthma, which is what Turbay suffered. Now, I've read 3 different reports on his death. One said it was a heart attack, one said it was asthma, one said something else. An overdose of Dramamine can cause a heart attack, so I can understand where that's coming from, where there's confusion between the asthma. If he was being treated for asthma at the time, it may have been reported as an asthma attack when in fact it was a heart attack. He was a doctor himself, so he's not going to deliberately overdose. So I believe, and just the timing of it, just when he was talking about coming back to Colombia, he's suddenly dead, so.
Right, and it's very convenient because Dramamine is utilized, like you said, for seasickness and stuff like that. But any of these chemicals which have a good sort of medicinal purpose to them, they also experimented with using larger doses or creating cocktails of drugs. So it could be possible that even if he is a doctor or whatever else, if he trusts a chemist to mix things and that chemist introduces the wrong chemical or actually introduces a far greater amount of a chemical than is required for the treatment, that's a totally plausible sort of convenient accidental death that could occur there, huh?
Yeah. So that's within the space of a year, that's the 2 top Colombian liberals taken out.
And what did they what did that wind up leaving? Because okay, if they've sort of decapitated the liberal factions in that country, who was it that took over there?
The Conservative Party led after that. And yeah, basically it started 20 odd years of violent unrest in the country.
So sort of like for 20 years following the fact that that liberal regime was decapitated, the more conservative elements really took hold in the country, and then you have the history that we pick up a little bit later, and is kind of well known if you have any sort of proclivity to understand South American politics as they evolved and as the American government's involvement would become much later known, but we were involved back then too. You see that sort of thing, that sort of maneuvering where you take out some of the stars on the team that's not quite cooperating with you ends up benefiting you in that it just leaves that power vacuum open so that the elements that you want to take hold. Or at least that's the strategy from the supposedly American side of it. So, how does that follow on?
I didn't go too deeply in past where I got to. Like I said, I could have written a whole book on the subject, but wanted to move on to get to the main theme, which was Oswald. So I sort of left it at that.
Okay, well, you mentioned United Fruit as well.
United Fruit, yeah.
That's got to be a fascinating sort of piece to the puzzle.
There was a strike in 1927 from memory, United Fruit Workers strike. Now, America, the US government said, fix this or we're going to send in the Marines sort of thing. So the Colombian government was basically forced to send in their own army to break up the strike. What they did was set up on rooftops with machine guns and just mowed everyone down. And people say that the secrets can't be kept. Well, this was kept secret pretty well because even now you can't put a figure on how many were killed. The estimates range so wildly that you get some people saying only 9 were killed, others saying 3,000. So,
Wow. Where did you discover? Because I've never heard of that massacre myself. I mean, it sounds like it even if 9 people were killed, it's kind of a massacre when you place guys with machine guns on rooftops and just start mowing people down. There's probably innumerable injuries as well, not just the deaths.
Yeah.
But I mean the bloodshed there. I mean, how did you discover
that? Like I said, when I decided to look at the background to Gaitan's problems in that country, you come straight away to United Fruit. I've got some stuff on my own website in regard to that particular event, also in the book, obviously. But yeah, how did I discover it? I don't know. I just stumble on these things. I don't know.
Well, you know what? Since you mentioned the website, you want to give out the web address for us so that people can go look at this stuff for themselves too?
Sure. It's reopenkennedykcase.net.
All one word, reopenkennedykcase.net.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was just curious about that because, it's awfully interesting to me, and also, and I hope you don't mind this, but I'm curious how it is that you got so interested in the case in the first place, because as I stated at the beginning of the program, I mean, you're over on the other side of the world. I mean, a lot of people think that this is more of an American fascination than anything else. But over the years, I've discovered that there are people in literally every corner of the planet that have an interest in this. I mean, one of the larger organizations that I could note right away is the Dealey Plaza UK guys. I know that there's a couple of organizations in your country as well who have taken it upon themselves to study this stuff. But I was just curious personally how it is that you started to become interested and involved in studying the case.
Well, just to address in general terms your what you're saying about people overseas, that we've got a saying here: when America sneezes, we catch cold. I don't know if you can follow what that is actually means, but basically whatever you guys do affects the whole world. So yeah, it's not just your interest; it's a world issue as far as I'm concerned. My own interest started in the late 1990s when I had a friend who insisted I read Anthony Summers' book. That basically got me hooked.
Conspiracy?
Yeah. I was aware of the assassination and could actually remember it from my own childhood, but, and I had suspicions that, we weren't being told the truth about it, but until I read that book, I didn't realize how deep this whole thing went. And I don't know, I'm the sort of person I hate mysteries. I hate puzzles. I just got to solve them, I just can't help myself. So I was hooked. As soon as I read that book, I was hooked.
You'd much rather have an explanation as opposed to a question, is what it is. And, that's something that, and it is also, rather noteworthy, because I was hoping you would say precisely what you said, which is that, when these sort of monumental things do happen in this country, at the very least, I don't know how it stands today, but, in recent history for sure, any of these sort of watershed events that occur here do echo around the world in one way or another. And looking at the Kennedy assassination, we could say that obviously, events in Vietnam would not have turned out as they did. The mere election of, Richard Nixon would not have occurred, I think. A lot of stuff that followed that assassination really was sort of the ripple effect from it. So, being that the rest of the world used to sort of feel the tremors from our earthquakes in a way, and still to this day, some places certainly do, it's definitely, worth mentioning that and explaining that, because, some people who haven't taken this up as an interest don't seem to understand that, regardless of whether it is the Kennedy assassination or it is, the crash of our market or something else, every time something really big does happen here that affects a massive number of people in one way or another, it does tend to sort of wave out, as that ripple effect, sort of the pebble in the pond effect, throughout the globe. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it's very much the case, and it does still happen today. A few years back, we looked like having our first person from the left as Prime Minister for quite some time. Someone from that party was a regular visitor to the US Embassy, as it turns out, feeding information, and we know this from WikiLeaks. And he asked the US ambassador here what he thought about this person from the left becoming Prime Minister. He then assured this Australian politician, "Don't worry about it. She knows what's expected of her."
Huh. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah, I do recall there was a lot of stuff that came out with the WikiLeaks, the diplomatic stuff, and a lot of that has kind of died out in this country. Nobody really talks about it at this point, but, the interesting interactions there, were notable in your country for sure because of the fact that you did have somebody who was running for prime minister who was interacting, with our assets on the ground. Let's just be kind, I guess. In one way or another, and that even with a friendly government, that's a pretty shocking sort of thing. So, yeah, it does stand to reason that there is a serious context for the stuff that goes on in our country, for the rest of the world. So, yeah, I find that interesting. General random question for you, and this has nothing to do with anything, but I'm just curious. You'll probably have nothing to say about it, and I just sort of jokingly asked you this one, but, they're still focused on this silly plane, in our part of the world, and I'm not saying that, a plane crash where people might have died or whatever else might have happened is a silly thing, but the news coverage of it is really ridiculous, and, it's strange to sort of watch the fact that it's, the search efforts are being launched from there and all that. I mean, do you have anything to say about that, by the way?
Not really. It's just, I agree with the coverage. I mean, there were earlier reports that two men had boarded that, were using fake passports or something like that. They were initially reported as Asian. it turns out they were Middle Eastern or something like that. It's just, the reporting has just been awful.
Yeah, well, as usual, there's always an atrocity in the media. And the JFK assassination definitely taught us that one, because that was the day that the news went live in this country. And, I think we've regretted it ever since. But anyway, so your interest began then, and, when did you actually get the idea to cover the Oswald, story and about sort of, giving his humanity its due sort of in literature? When did that really strike you to do that, and why?
Well, for I don't know, 12 years or so, or longer, I've been putting original research all over the web, only to see it end up in everyone else's books. Not that I mind that, that's why I was doing it. But apart from that, it would end up on page 2000 or something and be largely ignored after that. What I want to do is have some sort of impact on this case. I want to get it reopened. That's why my website's called what it is. And I figured to have any sort of impact, I've got to do a documentary or write a book or do something, to get media exposure like I'm getting now, whatever, just to showcase all this, because I get sick of hearing, we'll never hear anything new. Well, I've got so much stuff that's new, it's not funny, It's not true that there's nothing new we can learn from this case.
See, I didn't realize that you and I were in the same boat there, because, I've never written my own book, but, to be honest with you, I mean, I've contributed to others and not even asked for credit, just sort of, because when I would discover something unique, or I would get an interview with someone, and, it is strange to note now because I'm doing the radio show, but very quietly with tape recorders and old video cameras and, things like that, I used to be able to get interviews with people that some others couldn't get, and in some cases some others were afraid to try and get, and and I would give them just over to people that I knew were going to get published, and tell them, listen, this is yours, have it, because I would like to see this piece of information or this particular thing that this person said followed up on, and you might have the resources to be able to get it out to the public more than I do. So I would, this is of course in the days before the internet was popular, let's just say. It was more of a concern then that I would never get any of that stuff to see the light of day. So yeah. I handed it over to others. And like I said, sometimes, somebody would throw me a token of something for my help. Other times there was no reward for it, but that wasn't the point of why I did it. I just wanted to see the information emerge, and I was always disappointed. Not always, but almost always disappointed with its placement, or with the fact that it seemed to be completely ignored, though the rest of the manuscript sold well or sold moderately or whatever. Like nobody ever seemed to pay attention to the stuff that I had given them. And even if the writer found it remarkable, the public still wasn't getting it, even though that was my whole purpose for turning over my work,
Yeah, well, how it's happened with me more often than not is that I'll be contacted by someone who's just bought a book and say, Greg, you're in this book. And that's the first I hear of it, and so I'll get a copy of the book when I can, and a couple of times I've been disappointed in how that information's been used. So that's the other aspect of it. It's not used in the manner I would be using it.
So you're one of those guys who winds up, they just mentioned, well, when Greg Parker talked to this person, or when Greg Parker looked at something, this is what they got. This is what was said, or this is what he uncovered, and they just sort of mentioned it as an aside to the rest of what they're writing.
Yeah, like I say, that's fine. That's why I was putting it on the web. I wasn't putting it on the web to hide it. It was so that people could use it. But it's, I had to take that next step to get my side of, or the way I view my evidence, across. I was recently, interviewed by my local paper who somehow found out about the book. And she said, where were you when the 50th was? Why didn't you contact us? Well, the fact is, if I'd have contacted them at the 50th and said, would you like to interview me? They would have ignored me. They would have written me off as a kook. But what gave me credibility was the book being out. So they were more than happy to talk to me about that.
Oh, right. And, I viewed the 50th anniversary, quite honestly, as almost like the circus coming to town, because it seemed to me that all of the old clowns rolled back out and did their backflips for everybody. And really most of the legitimate, interesting, and new information was ignored. And the only things that were being recycled sort of on our side of the picket fence, as you put it, were the easily discredited lines, really, of thought. And I don't know if I should even call it thought.
You are absolutely spot on there, Chuck. Absolutely. Nailed it. Yes.
And this is why, because I was asked also why I didn't try to participate in any of that stuff too. And I said, look, it just seemed to me to be a complete waste of time, because, the mainstream wasn't going to, the big media outlets weren't going to talk to guys like me generally. And the smaller outlets really were more interested, again, in that, in let's just throw one example out there, I'm sure, and I've never asked you this, but I'm sure that the whole, Secret Service agent accidentally shooting Kennedy in the head, storyline that you and I are probably somewhat familiar with, was recycled right away, and all this kind of nonsense.
I'm ashamed to say that came from Australia. So
yeah, the revamping of it did, right? I mean, initially it was
the revamping did,
yeah. So sadly, but I mean, that was based on work that had been discredited, and I mean, not even just discredited among guys like you and me, but in a court of law, even the original author of one of the earlier books that had postulated the same thing had been sued and lost.
Yeah.
And still it was coming back out as, look, it's legitimate. And, man, it was happening a few weeks before the assassination here, before the anniversary, I mean to say, of the assassination here, that those old storylines were being, refed into the, machine, if you will. And, I just was so disgusted that there was just no way that I wanted to even be a part of that, So.
Yeah, well, that got a hell of a lot of publicity here, because, the author of it, was a former undercover police officer, who turned script writer for TV shows. So he had a very high profile here already. So that gave him a lot of exposure in the media. I almost got driven mad by people telling me about this show they'd seen on TV. I got to the stage where I could have punched walls.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was extremely. I think it was I forget which channel ran it, but it was a cable channel ran it here, and actually ran a documentary and revisited the information that Howard Donahue had brought out and all that, and then brought this guy on who I don't even want to say his name. I don't even want people to go Google it, But you and I know what we're talking about here, and it's just one of those wholly ridiculous lines, sort of like and just to give people other examples, so I'm not just picking on this one guy, but I mean there was I don't know if you've ever seen this, but the theory that there was an explosive device in the limo. There's of course the driver shot Kennedy theory, the sort of people were in places where human beings could not possibly have even been with guns, theories. There's all of these sort of ludicrous kind of speculations, and it becomes kind of disheartening sometimes, I think, when you're trying to legitimately chase things down, you're trying to verify your evidence, and not just simply take the word of one person or the on the surface a somewhat plausible possibility and running with it like some people seem to do. So I'm very glad that you're not one of those guys, I'll tell you that. So But yeah, Greg Parker has been all over the internet, and generally was a guy that I was familiar with as sort of making those, mentally stable sort of statements among arguments. It seemed all the time on forums and things like that. I noticed, and I was surprised to see that you had that you had started on this writing venture, and but I'm also very glad and it sounds to me like you've added another book to the essential list I'm going to have to pick up. So,
well, I've started out with a few threads that in this first volume, which throughout the next two volumes will be slowly tied together to form the ultimate, what I believe is the ultimate solution to the thing.
And you think that basically by following Oswald's life, you'll be able to unravel all of the sort of disinformation that has surrounded him, and be able to give us a not only a plausible but a reasonable storyline that'll explain this character and put him hopefully out of reach of being able to do this terrible thing that for so long has been sort of hung around his neck. I hope, huh?
Well, I'll tell you, the Rosenberg case is important to his story. Let me put it that way. There were things about the Rosenberg case that have been, shall we say, borrowed for the narrative.
Well, that whole sort of sheep dipping deal where he was, completely painted with that communist red brush was very convenient at the time. And, of course, the fact that he had visited the Soviet Union, had lived in Minsk and all that, I know that this isn't in the first volume, but, have you really, begun a deep study on that, thus far?
Yeah. Look, the second volume, and some of this is already on the web, that I've spoken about it consistently for the last few years on the web, but I'll show you in the second volume that there was a CIA agent in the office of the consul when Oswald was trying to renounce his citizenship. This guy's name was Ed Keenan. He was actually interviewed by John Newman, but unfortunately Newman was not aware of his background. He was over there as a exchange student from Harvard. He'd actually been recruited by Richard Snyder, who was the consul at Harvard, and I can produce all the documents to show that.
And just for the listeners, John Newman, one of the books that would be relevant to this discussion that Newman wrote was Oswald and the CIA.
Yeah.
And Snyder, just as a matter of reference, was present, I believe, the day that Oswald supposedly had walked into the American consulate in the Soviet Union and pretty much thrown his passport onto a desk and said that he wanted to renounce his American citizenship. As far as I know, that was never formally done, and it was pretty much his passport or his papers or whatever it was that he had tossed on that desk were pretty much thrown into a drawer until much later when Oswald was allowed to return, which was also suspicious because he was allowed to return with his Russian wife Marina and their child and everything with not only virtually no problem, but he was actually lent money by the U.S. government to be able to return from the Soviet Union.
And none of that would have been possible had he actually renounced his citizenship.
Right, it would have automatically disqualified him from any sort of help.
There would have been no coming back. And I believe that that's why it was never done, because the door was always going to be open for him to come back. That was part of the deal. But just getting back to Snyder, he worked for the CIA himself as a spotter, for a program called Redskin, which, hired students to go to the Soviet Union, as cover for CIA work, as far as, getting information on, missile silos, all that sort of stuff goes. So this guy that Snyder had recruited, into this program called Redskin, was sitting in that office when Oswald was there. Snyder lied when he was before the Warren Commission and said he was there alone apart from the assistant consul. That's not true. As pointed out by John Newman, this guy was also there. He'd come down from Leningrad ostensibly because of visa problems. That was his excuse for being there. But in reality, he was an expert in Russian life and culture, and I believe his real role was to orientate Oswald as to how he was going to live in Russia.
So the fact is that he's a young man and he's of that same age as these students that this guy, the Redskin program, like, recruiting students, which were, just young people that were supposed to be over there, as kind of like a student exchange program, ostensibly, but then they were actually, gathering intelligence for the agency.
Some of them definitely were, including this guy. He was actually made persona non grata by the Soviets in 61, or 62 maybe. I can't remember, one of those years. They said, "You're a spy, get out," basically. So he was uncovered, and in 67, when it was finally revealed that he'd been kicked out of the USSR, he went public and denied that he was with the CIA, but that's just part of the course. He definitely was with the CIA.
Well, right. And par for the course is exactly right. I mean, generally, if somebody is working for the agency, and that might, kind of call them on the carpet in certain instances, the first thing they're going to do is deny that they were working for the agency. And, again, the wild proximity of Oswald to intelligence assets at critical points, definitely creates an interesting, sort of, web of, occurrences and individuals that lead us into some odd directions there.
The other thing about Oswald's time there is that, what you won't find in any other book or in the official records, is the name Plutovsky. He was a white Russian who was parachuted into, Minsk, in order to set up, cells of resistant cells, basically. Now he was uncovered and captured, and executed by the Soviets. Why isn't his name in the records, in the JFK records? I mean, he's a white Russian parachuted into Minsk, recruiting people, and not a word about that. And, guess what? Oswald didn't start to make plans to go back to the US until after this guy was captured. As soon as he was captured, Oswald starts talking about going back to America.
And the fact that it's not even mentioned as a matter of background for Oswald's time in the Soviet Union. Yeah. See, I've always found that fascinating too, is that very little is said about it outside of the incident in the consulate and his work in the radio factory. It's a very sort of empty narrative that's been presented most of the time about Oswald's time in Russia. That's why I found speaking to Ernst Titovitz so interesting, because it gave me a little bit of the texture of what it was like, at least from someone who was there at the time. If
you speak to Ernst again, ask him about Plutovsky, see if he remembers the case.
Yeah, I certainly will. I mean, I got to be honest with you again. I wasn't even aware of that guy having been parachuted in there. And
no,
this is
it's not in the records anywhere. That's why.
Right. Well, and you put this stuff up on your website too, or?
Yeah. It's you can find it on my website. Where I found the information was it was reported in the media at the time, in the US media.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So what I've got by way of reference is old media reports about it.
Right, and I mean do you recall what the media reports were, like what the source of the media reports were?
Well, only that the Soviet news agency had reported his capture, and that he'd been trained by the CIA in West Germany as part of a program called Redskin and Red Sox, or two programs under those names.
Well, that's interesting in and of itself, because the Soviets would not have even allowed that to be in their news agency's feed, per se, if it wasn't useful to them. So they probably, touted it as a victory for themselves, like they had captured someone who was trying to infiltrate and, an enemy of their state, in other words. So they often would sort of make a big show, like they did with Francis Gary Powers and with others, when they had captured what they believed to be a legitimate spy. And it is, very notable that Oswald's arrival over there and everything else had not been so widely reported, and his activities there and all that kind of stuff. He was really viewed by them, I think, as a non-entity, pretty much. He wasn't of any sort of significance to the Soviets, it seems. Maybe I'm misreading it, but.
No, you're not. My own theory, I guess I can't prove it, but my own theory on that is that, the KGB were out of the loop. There were certain people higher up, in the Kremlin who were in the loop, but the KGB was left out of the loop. So their assessments were based on what they saw and observed for themselves, which was, a guy that, anyone will tell you isn't the type of person that's hired by the CIA. But if you're looking for a fake defector who's got a profile of an unstable background, you don't go looking at Harvard.
No, that's for sure. And
the defector profile that we talked about earlier, and that's what fooled them. That's what fooled the KGB. They were used to guys from Harvard, not someone like Oswald.
Well, right, and I mean it's definitely interesting that they, in talking to Ernst a bit, I found that he, by looking into certain other things and combining them with his own observations, even looking at the archive there, the KGB archive in Minsk, he had concluded that a few times they had even attempted to sort of bait Oswald to see if he would go for something that an intelligence asset would go for, and either one of two things seems to be possible here, and that is, one, either he was too smart to have gone for the bait, or he simply wasn't an asset that was going to be usable for gathering important intelligence.
No, I think that was part of the plan, to see if they would try and bait him.
Well, that's another way to go with it, I guess, is that they could have just stuck him out there to see to test the reactions of the agency, right?
Bingo. Yes, that's what that's essentially what I've been trying to say. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because Oswald as a person at that point was pretty expendable. So, I mean, even if the Soviets had decided that he was an agent and a spy, and they decided to execute him, it wasn't really a big loss as far as the intelligence community was concerned, because he wasn't highly trained, it seems to me. And how highly could he have been trained as young as he was, I think. But then again, that opens up a whole other possibility, because if he's being utilized for these sort of low-level gopher things early on in life, as a provocateur, as a teenager, and everything else, I guess that sort of puts the whole thing in a new context, doesn't it?
It does, and I believe there's another layer to his trip to the US, which I haven't gone into on the web. It'll be unique to the book, but I believe there's another layer to it which will surprise people, especially the names involved.
Well, that's one thing that I gotta say is that over the years, the further that you dig into the Oswald story, the amazing, sort of coincidences, and I hate to use that word, but the occurrences of certain names and interesting people that seem to, be involved in the life of this, fairly not so noteworthy character. I mean, if he had not been drawn into the situation with the assassination and everything else, I don't think we would have ever heard of the guy outside of a small news blip when he had gone to the Soviet Union, which, of course we could question exactly why that was done. The Macmillan narrative that emerged because she was over there to interview him and all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
no,
there's
go
an
ahead.
interesting story about Patricia. I came across a book that wasn't about the assassination. It was about a professor's experience as an exchange student in the USSR. When I was looking into this other guy, this Ed Keenan guy, I came across this book, and he was also an exchange student over there during the same period. One of his fellow students got married over there, and he got to talking to one of the other guests at this wedding, and this guest turned out to be from the embassy, and this guest had said to him, the funny thing is, this is the second wedding of a US citizen to a local girl I've been to in the last couple of months or whatever. And the other fellow's name was Oswald. Now the weird part about that is that the embassy claims to this day that it did not know that Oswald got married at the time it happened, and yet he's this guy being reported as saying that he'd been to the wedding.
Yeah, that's strange. That's definitely strange. Yeah.
Just the fact, and this guy, like I say, this guy that wrote this book didn't have a dog in the fight. He didn't care about this assassination. He knew Patricia Macmillan, and he mentioned this anecdote to her, and she was the one that told him that don't mention this to any conspiracy critics because they'll make a mountain out of this molehill. Well, guess what? This conspiracy critic did. did make a mountain out of it. Because she said to him that no, this can't be right. The embassy didn't know about this wedding, the Oswald wedding, so you've got to be misremembering it. But he went home after that talk with Macmillan, spoke to his wife, and she had the same memory as him. So, and like I said, this is a professor of English or whatever he was. He was a smart guy, and without a dog to fight. He put that in his book for what it was worth. And that's the only thing about the assassination he spoke about in the whole book, was just the fact that this guy from the embassy had said he'd been to Oswald's wedding when they weren't supposed to have known about it.
Right, and there's no reason for him to mention that anecdote. He doesn't seem to have an agenda, so it actually lends itself to being a more legitimate sort of account of something that happened there.
Yeah, the fact that he hadn't followed the assassination, knew nothing about it, didn't care about it, that all lends credence to his story.
Right, I always find that stuff interesting. Yeah. Sorry about that. I was saying I always find that stuff interesting when somebody who has no interest in it just simply finds some sort of piece of information that is related to it and just mentions it as an offhanded sort of piece of context for something else they're talking about.
It just sort of indicates that there was more to the wedding than meets the eye. Well, in my mind anyway.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly sensible because after all, I mean, again, this is a kid. I mean, he's not really supposed to have high-powered friends. I mean, the story has always been that he had no friends, that he had hardly any sort of connection to other people except his mother. And, and even his own brothers, he was sort of alienated from. Of course, the idea has always been passed along that he was alienated from the the country, his home, his neighbors, everyone. And here we are with someone who just happens to work for the consulate or the embassy, attending his wedding. That seems a bit odd, especially considering, like you said, the fact that they claim to not even know about it.
Yeah, they claim the first they knew about it was when Oswald mentioned it as an aside in a letter to them after the event.
Right. This is when he's making requests or starting to
make plans to go home, which happened after the curtailment of the Red Sox Red Cap programs because of Plutovsky's capture.
Yeah. So when you put all these things in context, it gets really strange. And, yep. That's why I sort of, also examined that whole thing about how, Oswald had sort of gotten taken with some other girl there in the Soviet Union, the Ella German story, and how, it just seemed rather, odd to me that very suddenly after something like that, he's, right away married to Marina after, only meeting her, 5 weeks earlier or something like this.
Yeah.
And that just seemed a little too odd to me. You don't normally meet someone and 5 weeks later marry them, especially when you have, I don't know what your opinion is on his ability to have spoke Russian or whatever, because that's been a sort of, bone of contention among a lot of people. But, if you just consider that he has, even a minor language barrier, and is being watched at all turns by the KGB and presumably by a couple of other agencies, his behavior is really just not normal. And I think that a lot of things can be drawn from that behavior, and the fact that some of these things where he does something that's seems very impulsive on the one hand, and yet on the other hand, almost a little too sophisticated, on the other hand, as I said, it really leads you to have to sort out, exactly what his mission was in his own mind and, possibly what his mission was in other people's minds, I think.
Those are the types of questions I will be tackling in the second volume.
Well, I really look forward to it, and I know that I've had you on for a bit longer than than you wanted to be on. I don't know if you want to get going, but if you want, we could continue on. It's up to you.
No, I think we've covered everything fairly well. I wanted to touch on the Korean War a bit more, but that's okay.
Well, if you want to discuss that, that's, again, a subject that I'm not super, educated on, and I'd love to hear about it if you want to. If not, we could, cover it at another time.
Can we leave it for a second go around at some stage?
You got it. Not a
Terrific.
problem. And I really appreciate your time tonight. And, would you just, do me a favor and, give everybody, I know that your book's available on Amazon. I don't know if that's the place you want them to buy it from. But your book is
it's available through all the usual online stores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Smashword.
Right. So Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all the usual sort of places where you'd find the books. Yep. And just give your website again, or any other websites that you'd want to point people to.
ReopenKennedyCase.net.
All right. Well, again, Greg, I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to digging into this book. And really, I'm telling you now, I'm looking very forward to the next couple of volumes, because I think that your work is going to be extremely different from what we've seen so far. And I'm always happy to hear someone who does not get themselves confused by the background noise of sorts, even though you have been, part of the internet world as far as the discussion goes. You haven't allowed yourself to be drawn into anybody else's web. You're thinking for yourself and actually doing the type of research that that makes all of us who care about the truth proud to call you a peer. So, really, I do appreciate it, Greg. Thank you.
No, that's my pleasure. I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
All righty. And, you take care now.
Okay. See you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Bye.
So, guys, that was Greg Parker, and his book is Oswald's Cold War. It is the first volume of the 3, and it's definitely something different. Now, I've only read excerpts of it, and I'm familiar with Greg to some degree because of his actions that have come up in forums. You can always find him on the education forum involved in discussions, but he's been to a lot of other places. Even on my YouTube channel, I used to see him make comments and participate in discussions where he was only after the most legitimate and verifiable aspects of evidence that could be found on the case. And I think that he's definitely somebody that I would point you guys to go look at. And definitely, I'm going to be looking through his website myself to get some more information because, I can't catch everything. So I must have missed a few things on his website. And I learned a few things today myself. The Redskin program, the sort of red baiting actions that have been partaken of by our government in the past are, at the very least, illustrative of the sort of behavior that the intelligence community uses even to this day, except instead of using the communist brush, they have decided to use the terrorist brush, whether it be domestic or foreign or otherwise. And it's clearly something that I think, again, it's always worthy of study when you want to look at the playbook to see why a team does what it does and to see what it's like. Because the one thing that we all have to keep in mind is that, the enemy may change, but the successful operations manuals do not change so long as they remain successful. Now, last night I was on rents.com with John Barber, who you guys have heard on my show a couple of times, and got a nice little plug out there for UCY. I was happy to do that, and really had a good time talking to John again. I didn't mean to go on to Rents to make a plug, but I sort of got led into it, and I found that kind of interesting. And I'm also finding it interesting that a lot of these broadcasts do continue to travel, and I'm definitely happy and proud to be part of this network. And for those of you who end up getting this as a secondhand recording, which apparently is one of the ways that a lot of the shows are beginning to travel now, that's evidenced to me by the fact that I've received emails, which, by the way, anybody can email me at chuck1972@lycos, lycos.com, for any sort of feedback if you like. I also have a Facebook page for this show, which is the Ochelli Effect. Again, people do contact me through my own Facebook, which is just Chuck Ochelli on Facebook. And if you're getting this as a secondhand recording, I suggest you go to the ucy.tv page and look at /TOE to start with. Of course, there's a lot of great shows on this network. There's the simulcasted shows of Jack Blood and John Stokes, of course. There is my friend Jimmy, Boiler Room Radio, which I am a listener of myself. I find myself listening to less and less talk radio nowadays, but Jimmy's show is definitely always informative, and I can appreciate the fact that you're working on not cursing too much, Jim, but it's okay. It's not something that I'm able to easily choke back on either half the time, but most of the time I try not to. And of course Lance Musser's on there with him. There are other radio shows on here which I do appreciate as well. I mean, the geoengineering show that Dane does, and we also have the World Crisis Replay, which comes on just before me. You have What Matters Worldwide with Vince Easley. It's an amazing network, and I'm very glad to be part of it as it develops. And again, if you haven't checked out the page, please do at ucy.tv. So, a couple of other things that have gone on lately. I got to say that I've been a little bit down, and maybe some people have noticed a little drop in my energy lately as far as my performance on here, and I do apologize for that. But at the same time, this is something that I do out of the love of doing it. I try to bring you guys as much interesting information and as many interesting guests as I can, and I hope that at some point this will grow to such a degree that not just the guys in the chat appreciate it, and not just the secondhand people that happen to pick up the MP3 later on or happen to find it on YouTube. Oh, that's another thing too. There is a UCY.TV YouTube channel, which anybody can find there, and usually you just have to sit there and stare at our banners while you listen to us. But being that a lot of people like to surf through YouTube, that's another good fun place to go to. I was going to do a presentation on little Illuminati history, but I really don't feel as though I have enough time to do that tonight. I probably will get to that on Tuesday. And that's another little programming change. Again, I want to note for the people that pick it up later downstream that there are live broadcasts of the Ochelli Effect on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, and also on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The show starts at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And you should definitely come in and check out the live shows as they go. Go into the chat room at your own risk, of course, but there's a live chat that runs right along with the shows. And the amazing array of individuals on this network is also something to go look at. If you click on when you go to the homepage, if you click on the shows tab, there's a drop down menu, but also, I think it's if you click twice, it'll go to a page where you get the little miniature banners of the show. And there's also a rolling banner at the top. If you click on the appropriate banner at the time it goes by, you can also navigate your way through all that stuff as well. About that Facebook thing, on my personal Facebook page, there is no friend request that I turned down. However, I do edit my friends occasionally, so sometimes people don't remain on the friends list when they start on the friends list, just so everybody knows. Of course, the few other shows that are of interest, by the way, which you'll see on that shows tab, is After the Last Cup, which comes on after me. Jimmy hosts that as well, Jim Funky. You have Jules' show in the morning, which is before the first cup, sort of like bookends in my mind. I can't seem to disassociate one from the other, even though they're very, very different shows. You also have, Mr. Blanche has his time, and, for some listeners that may be a little bit hard to deal with, but passion is a good thing, so I can't really say anything bad about that either. Right now we're also doing some rebroads of some older shows like Vocal Local, and of course Bill Cooper and Mae Brussel, especially on the overnights. My favorite out of those three would be Mae Brussel, but that's just me. And of course Bill Cooper kind of got mentioned in that last little discussion there with Greg Parker, because after all, he was the first guy to come out with the whole, the limo driver shot Kennedy thing. Also, a couple of future show notes. I'm going to have Larry Hancock on, and I also plan to have on the gentleman who was the author of that interesting series on that interesting post-apocalyptic series, which I had spoken to that gentleman on Vince's show actually, and I would like to get some participation from some of the other hosts actually. Because for people that do listen to the network all the time, the Prepper Chicks show, which is also an awesome show on the network, has featured stuff on those books as well. So I definitely plan on doing that. Larry Hancock is an author who's going to be on very soon as well. Little scheduling snafus with him so far, but he will be on at some point. I also have excuse me. I also have something planned which has absolutely Larry Hancock will be on discussing shadow warfare, by the way. So I'll just leave that title out there so you guys can sort of figure out what that means. But also in future programming, I will be looking at the RFK assassination with some actual witnesses and some other possibilities from the year 1968 as time goes on. As far as my historical stuff goes, I'm also trying to do more of the current stuff, some of the chemtrails deal, some of the GMO associated stuff. I will be discussing at some point my entire viewpoint on. Well, there was this story that Jules had dropped to me at one point, and Jules had covered on before the first cup, about these contact lenses which are being developed by Google, and the possibilities at a later time being developed for people with visual impairments, which is a personal issue for me, because there has never really been the technology to assist me. And for those of you that don't know, I am legally blind. I don't have very much vision at all. So sometimes when I say I don't see things, I really don't see things. It's not a matter of ignorance. It's a matter of physically not being able to see. So it was always an issue for me. And at some point, I think I'm going to have to get somebody's assistance because this is going to require some sort of technical information that I may not be familiar with. I may have to research it myself as well a little more. But there was a point at which, when I was a teenager, that I was part of a program which was studying sort of cutting-edge contact lenses that really make those Google lenses look like a joke. These things, when I started to describe them to somebody who was somewhat tech-savvy, they blurted out exactly what I was thinking. They said, "Oh, it sounds like literal smart water is what they were putting in your eyes." And you know what? At one stage of the experimental trials that I was going through, there was this very odd sort of substance which, seems rather science fiction-y when I explain it now to some people who aren't aware of the technological advances that really haven't been widely available for public consumption yet. That there was a sort of a substance that was more like a liquid and less like a solid, which was being utilized for contact lenses in the late 80s. And that stuff is pretty interesting, and I'd love to be able to connect some dots with some people that I am trying to talk to about it, to see exactly what context the research that was being conducted with my assistance at one point, like I said, for the purposes of trying to improve my visual acuity. I'd love to see what exactly that has evolved into, and what exactly I was a part of, in fact. The trials of those things failed with me for some very particular reasons, but I am also curious as to what they might have succeeded at with that type of technology, and hopefully I'll be studying that at a later date. One of the interesting things while I was waiting to go on to a show this week also was I was listening to someone discussing reversed speech and things like that. I'm seriously considering doing a show on that as well. And, this is one of those things where if you're not familiar with it, it's sort of like they play a phrase or a statement of someone forward, and then they play it backwards, and there seems to be relevant messages in people's statements, not only when they're recorded, but when they're speaking live. Apparently the subconscious sort of allows certain things to slip when you reverse the speech. This is the study of a few people. And, my background as a musician, I spent some time playing with audio tapes and trying to sort of debunk the idea that there was backwards masking involved in certain musicians' work as far as the lyrical content and stuff like that at one point. And so what I did is I reproduced some of the more widely known artifacts of that by checking out, say like the Led Zeppelin song where there's all those odd sort of messages in the song Stairway to Heaven and things like that. And I reproduced them to see what it was like. You have to change the pitch a little bit and be able to run a tape by reverse. Of course, electronically, it can be done differently now. But when you do that, you do discover that there are audible occurrences where, their messages can be discerned when you reverse the tapes. So I did that. And then, after a little bit of time, I also started to take recordings of live radio broadcasts and discussions, even amongst myself and my friends, and run them through a tape machine in reverse to see if I played with the pitch just a little bit. If the same type of phenomenon would be present in live speech and in just general conversations. Got to take a sip of my drink. Anyway, much better. So when I did that, I took, broadcasts of the Howard Stern show, which I've said on this network before I was a listener of when I was younger, and played them back and found odd messages in there that were also relevant to the discussion that was going on forward. And, and therefore, also, like I said, when I was sitting there just recording band practices and things like that, there would coincidentally be discussions and statements being made by people on those tapes that were just, random, were very spontaneous, that weren't planned in any way, shape, or form. But of course, when I played them backwards, I could again find sort of relevant statements in the backward play of the tape. And when I did that, I sort of felt that I had, in a way, debunked the idea that there was a legitimacy to backward masking. Subsequently, I've discovered that there were people that were attempting to construct lyrics for the purposes of creating backwards masking. But in some cases, it is a spontaneous event that occurs, like I said, when you're dealing with live broadcasts that are incidental to situations. You can't say that they were strategized that way unless the subconscious mind were to strategize them in a sort of impromptu fashion. So that particular topic might be something that I'm going to discuss as well. But I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to go about that outside of, the little anecdote that I've just laid on you guys now. But it was something that came to mind, and again, these other interests are going to come up as well. And I do also intend to continue on with the associates from the Liberty Beacon and to see what other interesting guests. I thought that was a pretty good one this week as well, with Terry Joyce, the lady with the Freedom of Joyce blog. And also she does a radio show somewhere, I forget. But, between her and Roger Landry, who pretty much, there we go, guys. Well, have a good night. After the last cup is next. Thank you.
age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and the final slap of choice, I don't know that the internet, professional around here, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to just read